Hi BookTube! I'm back for my slew of 2019 reflection videos and 2020 aspiration videos. So first of all, I'm going to talk about 2019 and what I didn't actually do. What I didn't do was track my reading. So why didn't I do this? Well, to be honest, I started out doing it, and then March of 2019 hit, and life just got really hectic. I was working at my parents' store, and they were in the process of closing the store. So I was spending mega hours with them, and at the store trying to get things all settled and sorted. And then I was out of a job, and suddenly had to search for a job for the first time in 8 years. So that took up a lot of time and a lot of worrying, just like all of a sudden I have, no money coming in. I was okay. I had money saved up, but still it was a little frightening. So tracking my reading kind of took a back seat during all that time. And once I remembered to start doing it again, the completionist in me was disappointed because I had lost all those months. And I think it was almost like 3 months that I neglected to do any tracking. And I just decided at that point that I was just going to stop and I wasn't going to track for the rest of the year and see what happened. So admittedly I could have gone back through like my bookshelves and I could have looked at old videos and stuff to figure out what I had read. But on my list of priorities for this year, that was kind of at the bottom. I also stopped making videos for a while, so I didn't even have that kind of record for myself. So it's been a very hectic year. I've had 3 different jobs this year, and then I moved, and there was a lot of family stuff going on, so to be honest, like keeping track of my reading just wasn't a priority. So was this an unusual thing for me? Is this an unusual thing in the larger reading community? I asked myself. For me it was a bit unusual because I very much thrive on organization and lists. However, when I really thought about it, I've only been doing this since 2015, and so it's not like I had been keeping track of my reading for years. It's just been a fairly new thing in the grand scheme of things. And prior to that, it was just, I just knew whether I read a book or not. I couldn't list all the books I've read, but if you named a book, I was like, oh yeah, I've read that. Or no, I haven't read that. And to be honest, is it even really a thing in the larger community outside of like BookTube and BookTwitter and Bookstagram? I've never really met someone in my real life and engaging, someone who has kept track of their reading. So is this really unusual to not keep track of your reading? Not really, actually. How do I usually track my reading? Well, I usually have a very extensive tracking sheet. I'm gonna admit I'm kind of intimidated by the one put out by Brock from Let's Read, just because I'm not very confident with Excel, and I know he goes through it and explains everything really well, but it's still just kind of like, I want something more simple, something that I don't have to worry about. So usually I keep track of a lot. I note the title, the author, the number of pages, the date it was published, the genre, the subgenre, the format, the age audience for the book, whether it was an ebook, physical book, comic, the author information such as their birthplace, where they're currently living, where the book is set, their sex, the ethnicity, different notes, and then I highlight my favorite books and my least favorite books. So I usually keep track of a lot of information, and I think that's what deterred me from doing it when I got so busy and involved in other things. I just look at it and be like, oh, there's too much to do right now. I'm just not going to do it. I'll do it later. I'll keep procrastinating on that. So what were some of the positives of not tracking my reading? One thing is I didn't feel pressured to hit a certain number of books, because the whole thing with tracking the reading was also to see how many books I've read in a year. So I didn't know how many books I read last year. So I didn't feel that pressure to hit a certain number. So if I read like 96 books, I'm like, oh, I have to read 4 more to get to 100. Or if I only read like 40 books, like I really don't have a number to pitch my reading this year. And I think that took off a lot of weight. In other years, I felt like I've had to hit at least 100, and I was concentrating heavily on numbers. I'd also look at how many pages I read each month and be disappointed that I didn't read as much as the previous month, or didn't read as much as I thought I would. And then I make the next month about reading a certain amount of books, a certain amount of pages, instead of just enjoying my reading, because I'd always inevitably fall behind, and I'd feel overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that I was forcing myself to read. Another positive is that I didn't feel pressure to finish books in a certain amount of time, and abandon them to start a new month afresh. When I was tracking my books, I wanted to read all the books I was currently reading within that month. So I really timed my reading. Sometimes this left me with nothing to read in the last few days of the month, or ignoring real life things in order to finish books, without that looming pressure of the end of the month and you had to finish these books so that they fit into your spreadsheet nice and neat. I was able to take my time reading books at a comfortable pace, and I feel like I had less reading slumps as a result of that because I didn't feel forced. For me, feeling obligated to do something will immediately put a damper on it and result in me either dragging my feet or just not doing it at all. So without tracking my reading, it was just solely a thing for pleasure. But there are some negatives as well, of course. I can't remember every book I've read this year. If you name a book, I can tell you if I've read it or not. But to be honest, I probably actually wouldn't be able to tell you without looking at my sheets whether I read it this year or last year or the year before that. And so that's something that I find happens as you get older, as you become more of an adult. It's kind of all the days and the weeks and years merge into one. So I can't look back and tie books to certain events. Like, oh, I remember reading this in 12th grade, but I can't tell you something I've recently reread. So for example, I know I read Brave New World in 12th grade. I remember the teacher talking about it and learning about it. I can also tell you I recently reread it, but I can't tell you what year I reread it in without looking at sheets and knowing when that was. I don't know if there were any trends in my reading as another negative side effect. Things that I would like to change or continue with my reading. Do I feel like I read enough authors of color? Did I read more Canadian books this year? Did I read more male or female authors? I don't know, because I don't have that list to look and check. And I'm kind of anxious as well that there's going to be this gap in my spreadsheets, because I like things to be complete. And I know I'll look back and see I have a reading list for 2018 and 2017 and back to 2015, and I have one for 2020. But I don't have one for 2019, which is going to be interesting. So am I going to track my reading in 2020? As I said, yes. But I'm going to take the lessons I learned and maybe not stress out about it as much, especially in regards to the dates and finishing books within a month and looking at the number of books and pages I've read and really stressing about that number. And I don't know if I'll be as extensive in my tracking, so that I can make it easier on myself so I don't feel as overwhelmed by it. So I'm gonna just keep track of the author, the name of the book, and maybe the page numbers. Might add more things at the end of the year so I can go back and look at those more detailed things that I like to look at. So yeah, so I don't want this to be a duty. I want to keep it as a hobby and keep that pleasure aspect of reading. So my questions for you are, do you track your reading? Why do you track your reading, and how does it make you feel? Do you feel pressured by it, or do you actually enjoy doing it? Let me know in the comments down below, and thank you for watching.